Okay, so continuing on with the truth table discussion that we started in the last video, we're on page 4 now, and note that there's just a bunch of activities. The rest of the lesson is going to be practicing the rules that we learned in the previous video. We have 4 rules about how to evaluate if it's a conjunction, a disjunction, a biconditional, or a conditional, and also, I guess, what to do with the negation. So pause the video now if you haven't already done those, because it's much better if you practice that before you see the answer. So please do pause the video, but I'm going to be completing these truth tables for the lesson now. So the first activity we see is P and not Q. It never describes like what P and Q represent, because it doesn't matter. We did some examples where I would say P is my name is Cindy and Q is I teach at ACTC, but it really doesn't matter what the statements are. There's 4 possibilities. If there's 2 statements, they could both be true. One's true, I didn't leave enough spots. The second one's false, or it's a false and true. I need one more column, don't I? Or one more row. Or they're both false. Those are just the 4 cases, 4 possibilities. When you say 2 things, they're either both true, or one's true and the other's not, or vice versa, or they're both false. So, but our new thing was using these rules, and now you may, in your brain, or on a side note, negate Q in your head. I do not, though. I would write that down. I would make myself a column over here and say negate Q, so I'll have that solid to look at. So that just means look at column Q, and then go over here and put the opposite of that under Q, like so. And then you may even want to copy down column P to have it handy over here, or you can just look over here. It's not required. So when you're doing your homework on MyLab's math program, online, it may require that you plug in or not. So this is good for me to let you know. Some of the problems are programmed where they make you throw in every little detail, all the columns, and then others are assuming you're using some scrap paper and then just fill in the final answer. So be aware of that. If it just asks for the final answer, well, no one could know that out of the top of their head. They would need to do it on some scrap paper in your notes. So this one, let's say, it asks you to show everything. So I'm going to copy column P right here. Just look over to the original stamped table and copy column P. All right, so now I've got P and the not Q copied down. So now I use the rule, the and rule we talked about in the last video. It takes 2 T's is a T, and that's the only time it's true. When you use the word and, it's the most restrictive rule. They have to both be true. So that's going to be a false. Here's a true and a true. That's true. False, false, nope. And then true and a false, there, false. So the only time it's true is just right there. And the final answer, by the way, if it is one of the problems in your homework that only says just what's the final answer, the final answer is right here, how you've evaluated the conjunction sign. All right, so that's our final answer. And then it could ask follow-up questions like under which case conditions is this statement true? And so the only time it was true was case 2, which you could describe as statement P has to be true and statement Q can be false. That's the only time that this works to make a reasonable true statement if you write it as a sentence. All right, another example. This time they give us some, just to make it more interesting, some descriptions of statement P and Q. Statement P is Jose is an artist. Statement Q, Jose is a musician. So if we want to evaluate, and this is the question they ask us, Jose is not an artist and Jose is not a musician. So just to give us some practice turning these things around, what is that says? If it negates Jose as an artist, so that would be not P, and then it uses the word and we know looks like that, and then Jose is not a musician negates Q. So that's our work to do. Not P and not Q is our problem work. I'm going to go ahead and erase that. Okay, so now we want to do our 4 cases, P and Q. These are the just 4 possibilities there. And I'm going to show all my steps for a while on these. I'll probably do it in the video, just showing all the steps. But just know you can skip some steps as you get better at these. That's up to you. But I'm going to show what not P would look like by looking over here at column P and writing the opposite, carefully noting. And then not Q, I'll do the opposite of column Q, F. I'll make that a T, F, and T. So I'll copy down So I've got that to look at, and then I'm looking between them. The operation is to do the and. It takes two trues, so false and false, nope. False and true, nope. True and false, nope. There's my T and T, true. So the fourth case is the true case. Now you'll notice in your homework it does ask you a B and a C part. It says, under what conditions will the compound statement be true? And so it was true, and again, remember that's your final answer where you did the work for the operation. It was true only in case 4. So what were the conditions of case 4? Statement P had to be false, and statement Q had to be false. In other words, Q was Jose is an artist. Well, that has to be false. He's not an artist. And statement Q, Jose is a musician. That also has to be false to tell it in the sentence that we used. That would just be totally not working. So if Jose is not a musician and Jose is not an artist, both of those P and Q are false, then it makes sense to say the statement that they made, that would be true. C part, it says, suppose that Jose is an artist, that statement P is a false statement. So we have an F, Jose, F for that. And then Q, Jose is a musician, is a true statement. Is the compound statement given in part A true or false? I think everything else was false, so we can say that, but here's how we would look it up. And if this were our question, we would look in our truth table for an F and a T. That's here, F and T. That's case 3 is F and T, and the answer was F. So we could show it on our table to say if P is false and Q is true, which we already kind of talked about, they both have to be false before this works. But just to practice that, an F and a T, we can find that in case 3. An F for P and a T for Q gives the final answer of false. So we can verify it to answer the question. All right, moving along. We just keep doing this in all various ways to practice this idea. But it's all just the same practice here, following our rules, writing down our cases. So number 3, we have a not of not Q or not P. Now later and maybe the next section, we learn a rule for distributing the not, but we have not done that yet. So to work this, we'll need to do what's in parentheses first. So that our steps would be figure out not Q, figure out not P, then use your OR rule, get your answer for that like we were doing in the previous one, and then we'll have to negate it. Well, that will be the last step. Out of the parentheses negates that answer. All right, so that's what it's going to look like. So making our table again. I wish I had a little stamp. I just stamped the truth table on the board to get this started. So we have our 4 cases for P and Q, either both true, true, false, false, true, false, false. All right, and our question is what I just wrote above. I'll write it here on the line on the chart. That's what I'm going to do. Let me erase it up there. All right, so the steps would be in order of operations. Basically, when you do a truth table, you are following the order of operations like we do in regular math. You do what's in parentheses first. So step 1 would be, I'm going to make a column under these to do each step. Step 1 would be negate Q. So it's F, T, F, F, just doing the opposite of this. Not P, I'm looking down column P and writing the opposite. Try to make sure eyes cross here, you have to be careful. And then, so that was step 2. Then step 3 would be, like on the last one, we would have been done, do the OR statement. Now, we are doing an OR now instead of an AND. So the OR rule, remember, was a little more lenient. It was the most forgiving of our rules. As long as one part is true, it's true. So F and F, though, not. That's our F. So the OR rule, an F and an F is F. That's the only time. All the other times, as long as one part's true, it's true. So that's my answer to step 3. Then the final answer is step 4 out here, outside the parenthesis. It says negate what you got in that parenthesis. So we take our answer we got from a parenthesis and do the opposite here. So true, we had a true, so that becomes false. A true becomes false. True becomes false. And then this would be the final answer in this case, again, because of order of operation. All right, and then you could be asked follow-up questions like we saw in the last problem, like, under what conditions is this true? Well, they both have to be true. That's the only time this is true. as case 1. So you could have follow-up question. Okay, moving on. Another example. Again, if you haven't done these, please do pause the video and get your practice on these before seeing the answer. We're doing a not P or Q in parentheses with an and not P. Is that just wild thing to do? Yes. All right, again, we have our 4 cases. That happens every time. Either if there's only 2 statements, we'll get to 3 on the next one if we can get it in on this video. Okay, so we've got our 2 cases, or our 4 cases when we have 2 statements, a P and a Q only. And here's what we're doing. Here's our problem. Order of operations says do this parenthesis first, do this, then I'll negate P. This will be our final answer right there. Final step. All right, so I'm going to put little columns under these to help me do my part. All right, so negating P just means we look over here at P and copy the opposite down. Q, now some people would say don't even bother doing that because you can look right here at it. So that's really up to you if you want to show it. But Q is the same thing. We're just copying this column down. And then we'll do the OR rule. That'll be my next step. OR says that it's the most forgiving as long as there's 1 T in it, then it's true. So the false is the only time that one's false. All the others we have 1 T involved, so that's true. So this is the answer to that parenthesis. Maybe star it to remember. This is your column that answers that parenthesis. And we're going to compare it with not P. So once again, I'm negating P. I copy down. I've already got that right here, actually. I'm copying it just again, or I can look over here and do the opposite. Be the same. Then the final answer is you take this column plus this and apply the AND rule. That's the last step. So the AND rule is strict, you know, it takes 2 truths. That's the only time that AND's true, 2 truths. So I got a T and an F, so that's not. F and an F, that's not. Here's a T and a T, that's true. Here's a T and a T, that's true. And that would be your final answer. There's a couple of truths on that if you have follow-up questions. All right, so again, that might be all that's asked in your homework. It might just ask you the final column. Keep that in mind. But you need to do all of this on some paper to get there. All right, number 5. Now we're going to do one that has the 8 cases. So if you had 3 statements, a P, a Q, and an R, or whatever letters you like. These are just the logic sections usually likes P's, Q's, and R's. But there's no magic there. It can be any letters. We're just using representation. 6. I need 2 more columns, or 2 more rows, I guess. Okay, my 8 cases. And then I'm going to work the problem P or not Q and R. That's going to be my work to do in order of operations. Alright, so we could have all true. There's 8 possibilities here. This burns up some of the time. Sorry, I better copy these down. And there's no magic to the order. Again, you just have to find all the different combinations here in any order, really. It would not matter. But these are all unique, 8 different cases or ways we could talk about these 3 things. All right, then we're going to do P, and again, you could copy that down. I told you I'm being just extra particular and showing all my steps here. And then you could copy down not R, negate all of that. Any wrong move messes you all up. I know that's rough. And then using the OR rule between these, it takes just 1 true. Make it. And then, well, that's the answer to the parenthesis. And then we copy down R, just as it is. And then the last step is the AND rule, and we compare this and this. They have to be two true. So true, that one's true, there's a true, and everything else is false. Your answer there. That's your final answer.